back in the main room now. Thank you all very much. Please remember to mute yourself.
Oh yeah, wait for it. Just
take it away, Saul.
Jason, do you want to introduce Rachel, Rabbi Rachel?
Yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Rabbi Rachel Joseph from Congregation Beth Israel.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here and allowing me to help facilitate and moderate this really important conversation. Even in our breakout group, excuse me, we started to talk about these issues and a sort of a long-term perspective of Portland and where we are. And I'm really excited to bring this into a Jewish context. As a rabbi, that's something that I, of course, think about a lot. And as we know that houselessness and homelessness is really the root of the Jewish people, going all the way back to being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. We're a people of wanderers. We say this at Pesach when, you know, my ancestors were wandering Arameans, that we have always been in search of home, which means community, but also in search of place and house and place to be deeply rooted. So it's something that is so much a part of our tradition and so much about something that we care about. So I'm really thrilled to be able to hear from some of our experts in our city today. My plan is to ask each of them to share some opening words about their work and how their Jewish values underpins their work. I have some questions for them, and then also some questions were submitted ahead of time, and then there's the chat feature, which should be enabled. Looks like it's enabled. So if you want to send things to the chat, that I will be moderating and try and hopefully we'll have time to share some of your questions as well, because I'm sure you brought some questions to the table. So this afternoon, we are going to be hearing from three of our leaders, and I'm going to start with Craig. And Craig is Executive Director of Stone Soup PDX, nonprofit restaurant training those at risk of homelessness for careers in the food and hospitality industry. He's no stranger to helping, as he developed communities and offered a hands up across 3 continents with 18 years of experience in building community and event production across the US, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Upon returning to the West Coast, he and his wife Ronit started Stone Soup to blend their love of food with their passion for social justice. So I'd ask Craig to lead us off.
Thanks, Rabbi. So as Rabbi Joseph just said, my name is Craig Gerard. I'm the Executive Director of Stone Soup PDX. We are a nonprofit restaurant, and we do job training for people who are at risk of homelessness so that they can get a career in the food and hospitality industry. Just a little brief about what our program normally looks like. We take referrals from referrals from our social service referring partners, places like Central City Concern, Transition Projects, New Avenues for Youth. They refer people into a 12-week training program. They learn food safety and hygiene, and then work the different stations of our restaurant. And then in the end of, and also go through a life skills training program. And then the end of the 12-week program, we link them up with our job placement network. These are restaurants and kitchens around Portland that are interested in hiring our graduates to work in their own kitchens, so that we try to give a full scale from referral all the way through their next job, training people who are at risk of homelessness for their future careers so they can get a living wage job.
Craig, do you mind speaking to starting us off with a Jewish context of Stone Soup and why this is important to you?
Sure. So from the beginning, I think Ronit and I were steeped in a tradition of Tikkun Olam that we felt the need to not just provide for our own family, but also make little repairs to the world where we could. And we saw this as an opportunity to live that Jewish value and make sure that we were teaching our children as we were taught growing up. And that, I think for both Ronit and I, we saw the crisis that was happening on the streets, but then beyond streets in shelters and in other places where the houseless population has been marginalized. And we see that people of color or members of the LGBTQI plus community have been have greater representation in the homeless community, and we really felt like we wanted to leave the world in a better place for our children, and that we wanted to have an answer for, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this issue? When we were asked by our kids to say, look, we have these solid steps that we know that we can take to make people's lives better. And I think a lot of that is rooted in our upbringing and rooted in the values that we were both taught as children.
Thank you. And knowing your children, you're doing a great job. And I'll love to welcome Nili Yosha. Nili is a Tel Aviv native who then was stunned by the number of homeless youth on the streets of America. She started a filmmaking program outside the frame, which has come to stand for homeless youth empowerment, and was awarded 2018's Best New Nonprofit by Portland Monthly Magazine. She has 2 kids and a wife who is also a midwife. So Nili, if you could also talk a little bit about Outside the Frame and the Jewish values that underpin your work.
Thanks. Like a good Jewish girl, I will start with my family. We've been using media to deal with the historical circumstances of our lives for several generations. My grandfather was the radio announcer for the Jewish freedom fighters of Israel underground, while my grandmother was a foot soldier trying to fight for Jewish independence in Israel. A generation later, my parents made the first anti-war film in Israel, naively titled Peace, A Wayfarer's Prayer. And it came out right after the Yom Kippur War, so nobody wanted to hear it. But they, in their naivete, thought that when this film came out, within a week, a month tops, there would be peace in the Middle East. So I grew up knowing that art is a way to try to make the world a better place. I spent my teenage years in Israel in political youth groups, out on the streets, in basements, just trying to repair the world. Got tired of it, moved to the States on September 10th, 2001, realized you gotta do it. It follows you. You have to do it wherever you are. And I was stunned by the number of homeless youth on the streets. These are teenagers, these are kids, and don't believe the hype. Nobody chooses to be there. It might be a front, it might be something you tell yourself, but nobody wants that. So what gets me out of bed in the morning is it's not for you to complete the task, but nor can you refrain from it, because it seems overwhelming sometimes. Justice, justice, you shall pursue, and Eugene Debs, while there's a lower class, I'm in it, da 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 da. So I come from supplemental education. I like working with kids that choose to be there voluntarily, not forced in school. Anyone that's been an educator knows what a pain in the ass dealing with parents is. So homeless youth was just like a perfect marriage of my love of social justice. What I saw as the most pressing issue in this country, the fact that people, young people, any people live outside, and the arts. So I found myself working with homeless youth. I said, what can I do with them that matters to them? Because otherwise they won't play. And that will show the world what they're made of. movies, you know? As much as I tried to escape the family business, you can't. So we put cameras in their hands. Now we have a bunch of programs, and I'm talking to you from the top of Union Station, where we have a big studio. We have a variety of programs where they come in and they get to make movies about whatever they need to express. And they do it with mentorship of indie freelance filmmakers from town, so that they'll see that it's a real viable profession and have mentors. They do outreach screenings where they get to share their work and dialogue with people. They get to go into places where they never stepped before, anywhere from juvie hall to city hall, and be experts and get paid. We have ongoing workshops twice a week. We have contract work now. I have a crew on the ground documenting the regional responses to COVID in Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County. So it grows with the needs of the youth. It's a place for them to remember what they're made of, build some confidence, community skills, and the films are there to remind us, the world, what they're made of, and that we're responsible for them. And it's cheaper to support small empowerment programs like these than to support these youth for the rest of their life. With a small intervention, they can become contributing citizens rather than a budget line item, you know, on our public services. Did that answer the question, Rabbi?
Yes, and Saul has put the websites of the organizations we go through, and on the Outside the Frame website, you can see some of these movies, and there was a film fest that just happened online last weekend, and I think you can see some of that on the website as well after our conversation. And Andy Olshin, who's joining us, he's the founder and board chair of Cascadia Clusters, and also a former deputy city attorney and homeless coordinator for San Francisco, social and entrepreneur, grant writer, and researcher grounded in best practices. If you have been to the JCC, you have seen his work right next door. So Andy, if you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure, thank you. So I am now sitting inside the first of 3 new ADA wash pods that we are building. And I'm telling folks this because what we're trying to do here is we employ homeless individuals. We teach them how to become carpenters, a little bit of plumbing, a little bit of electrical, et cetera, et cetera. Mostly we give them their dignity back. We have a training program. We've had 12 trainees go through it so far. We've got the crews now that we can operate both in residential construction, commercial construction, and then we continue working with other nonprofits like Tivnu and Stone Soup and Outside the Frame. We've been interacting with all the nonprofits for the last 3.5 years that have been working in these areas, and we are poised now to frankly lead the production of what we've been talking about for years, that we need to be able to build very, very affordable housing in Portland quickly and cost effectively, and use evidence-based MSW level counseling and job training resources, like what we did with New Avenues for Youth. Not we, Andy, we, the city of Portland, with some very serious business resources. Bill Furman, there were a whole group of them that came together in the 90s and put some resources down, and our homeless youth system is actually doing so much better than it would be if we hadn't made those investments decades ago. And we have the opportunity now to make the investments in the adult service system that has been limping along for a long time with diminished federal funding, federal focus, whatever. But right now we have a public health crisis on the streets of Portland. And what I've been trying to do for the last 3.5 years is listen and learned from the folks that have been doing this work in the trenches or living the life in the trenches. And I also, I reflect back every day around every day being mitzvah day. And I attribute that to my favorite rabbi, Rachel Joseph. And, helping people to help themselves, to step forward, to be open to contact of some of these folks is taking a risk. I know that. I wear my super masks. I get out every day and try to work with folks who are living in their cars, who are living down at Hazelnut Grove, who are living in tents. And the other day I had the opportunity to go down into Old Town at the invitation of an African-American activist down there, Laquita, who is trying to work in the Second and Cooch area to add what we desperately need is hygiene. And she somehow got somebody to donate a porta potty. She set it up, and she's moving ahead with providing some resources in one of the buildings that I think Airbnb has its headquarters in. And, I really think what I've learned is that we right now, we as in adult Portlanders that have some common sense, let's just group ourselves like that for now. We have to protect ourselves, our parents, and their grandchildren, which are our kids, although sometimes right now they're making us nuts. But we need to protect everybody from COVID-19. And frankly, the hygiene issue on the streets of Portland has the potential to be an unbelievable disaster. And we are not doing it. So once we can, frankly, get people the resources so that we don't see human feces on the ground in Old Town, I think then we can start talking about housing these folks. I do think that the steps that the city has taken to limit camps to 8 people or less, which just came out like yesterday. And I actually left a call talking with the Old Town Business Association, Helen Yin, just 30 minutes ago, talking about finding areas that would be, it's like about 9 surface parking spots is about what it comes down to. To put 4 to 6 tents, it's about a 400 square foot footprint that we'd be looking for on the surface street parking lot, or somehow in a courtyard, or somewhere. If it's undercover, great. Like the Old Town Coffee Shop is perfect. So we're going to bring a unit down there and plug it in. It would be great if we had the property owners and some of the business people in the area just say, hey, we're going to let you hook up our hoses. We're going to set the drains up. We're going to give you some power. And, we're going to make you feel like you're part of our little community, and you're going to come in and bring hygiene resources until this is over, right? And so we are building these units. The unit that's down in Old Town right now, we built a couple of months ago. It has 2 showers going at all times and 2 double stack laundry units going at all times. It's been running pretty much around the clock for the last 3 months. And so we've tweaked the problems that came up. We ended up buying an extra dryer and running that through their generator so folks can get their laundry done. This is what we need right now. We need the next 30 days, the next 60 days to focus 100% of our volunteer, business community, faith community energy on this hygiene, humanitarian crisis in Old Town, because if we don't, COVID-19 is going to be here for years. And all these businesses that are down there, I mean, I don't want to be an extremist. I don't really know the medical truth of this. I'm just saying it sure feels like this is about to explode in our faces. So with that, I will just say every day is mitzvah day. If you want to help out, give us a call. We're actually running workshops on the site here. Almost every day we have at least 4. We have our workstations 10 feet apart. We are building picnic tables, 4-foot picnic tables for restaurants to put on their sidewalks, which is another cost-effective, thoughtful approach that people can take to communicating with the homeless folks that are camped in front of their business. we want to put picnic tables here because we need the revenue. Things like that, common sense solutions, helping people move from in front of the businesses. We can help with that. We can work with the businesses, connecting with groups of 8 to 10 people at a time, encourage them to go look at some of the other places that the city is working on, connecting these dots. That's going to be incredibly important. Take care.
Definitely. Thank you, Andy. I think that, you know, one of the things clearly in this brave new world that we're living in is that when we have been asked to stay home during a global pandemic, what does it mean if you can't stay home? One of the things that popped up in the chat was that we're not sure about the science of COVID, you know, and is it really a fecal-borne disease? Because Andy's talking about hygiene, but I think irregardless of that part of the science, the idea that people literally have no place to be except for on the streets, and that with the lack of affordable housing, with the lack of inventory, with the lack of jobs, that more and more people are forced, you know, out of, even if they had a home, forced out of a home. And so curious about how the work has pivoted, how it has changed in this time. Are more people paying attention to what's going on in leadership? And maybe Craig, if you could address that, how your work has changed, how more leaders have become interested, where you see maybe that there's some new light because of this crisis.
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about Stone Soup's COVID pivot. We closed our culinary training program mid-March, right as everybody else was closing their businesses. And we were approached that same day by Mark Jolin of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, wondering what our capacity was for making meals for new shelters that they were standing up. And the county set up, they weren't new shelter beds. They were taking people in existing shelters and moving them to hotels and community centers to increase distancing within those shelters. And the county saw an opportunity to kill two birds with one stone by not only increasing safety, but also keeping restaurants employed. So we were able to play a part to organize other restaurants to help feed those shelters. So we're doing breakfasts, lunches, and dinners for 6 different shelters right now, 3 of which are hotels, and they're moving away from the community center model and towards hotel rooms. And the county is continuing to foot the bill for those hotels, which, and you know, back to the original ask that they made of Stone Soup, which was to feed all of these people 3 meals a day. It was, they gave us a little bit elevated budget to do so, and the double problem that they were solving is keeping restaurants employed as well. So we're not making the homeless crisis worse by having restaurant employees who are typically, you know, frontline workers that are barely scraping by anyway. Those industry employees were able to keep their jobs, and in some cases, some of our restaurants, the contract meals that we're doing have allowed those restaurants to stay in business. So I applaud the county for their leadership in that realm, and allowing us to keep our business going by, and our partner restaurants going. In terms of what other leadership is doing to pay attention, I think, I do think that while the county has shown a bit of leadership on that front, business leaders also have a role to play in, as Andy was saying, stepping up their willingness to work with our folks and our population. I think a lot of people that, a lot of business owners that I talk to have real hesitancy in hiring folks that have gone through our training program. And I would say the opposite should be true, in that a lot of the times when someone is shown the initiative to go through a training program like what Nili is doing and like what Andy is doing, like what Stone Soup is doing, if they can make it to the end of that program, it shows that they are hungry to make their lives better, and that they then will be a better employee, and they will appreciate the opportunity for employment even more than you know, the recent college grad or the kid who is you know, doing Zoom classes from home. That the folks that have completed these training programs and put in the time and blood, sweat, and tears to do that, they really do make great employees.
Thank you. And Nili, since we're on a call with lots of different business leaders in the community that have gathered now through, I think they used to be breakfast time, now moving to lunch on Zoom, thinking about how can we partner, what can the for-profit, the business community do in partnership with the nonprofits to make a difference?
First of all, I think lunch is much more civilized than those very early breakfasts. Let's keep it going. I come from a country where we expect our government to take care of the citizens. And so I feel like it's weird that we're asking the business community to solve a governmental problem. However, business people have a lot of power, and I guess what I ask is to wield it for good, and remember that these, we can stop another generation of homelessness. Think about them like your kids, you know, think how hard it is for your own children to like make it in the world in this economy. That much harder when you don't have a support network, when you're meant to become financially independent a decade before your peers. These are kids. I agree with Craig. These are the hardest working, hungriest kids you've ever met. They make movies. Making movies is hard work, and they come from under a bridge where they sleep, or in a shelter where they're, you know, tons of people packed together and all the demons come out at night, or they're transitional housing, which once you get a little bit stable and you're in housing, then you're out of survival mode, and then you kind of emotionally fall apart. They come and they work hard every day for weeks to make a movie because they realize that they actually have a voice and that they're treated as human beings. So as a business community, demand that the officials, that the electeds who listen to you guys more than anybody else, lift up the bottom. The COVID crisis hits suddenly. We have suddenly the city mobilized some shelters and like has done in 3 weeks things that they could have done years ago because the homeless crisis is ongoing. Their hands are tied, also limited by federal dollars. The only way to solve homelessness is to give people a home. There's no other fundamental difference between us other than one of us has a home and the other doesn't. And it's not a God, it's like a man-made thing, you know? In the 80s, they closed the faucets and this is how it happened. And now we have all these weird little 10-year plans, chronic homelessness, this, that. We need more places for people to live that can afford to live in it. We need to raise the wages. You know, my kids haven't gone back to school partly because their teachers make more money on unemployment right now than teaching our children. That's a crime against humanity. They're teachers, you know. Things are gonna have to change structurally. So understanding that it's a systemic problem and not a personal failure, like, and using your voice loudly, and yeah, take a chance on some kid. You won't regret it. And
you can always walk into Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
What's that?
You can always walk into Ben and Jerry's ice cream in Pioneer Courthouse Square. That's run by New Avenues for Youth and has been for a long time. And so you can buy ice cream. You can get T-shirts designed. The T-shirt I'm wearing right now was made by the kids down at their T-shirt print shop. I mean, there are lots of ways you can cost effectively support nonprofits that are working directly with folks in the trenches, so to speak, not to, play on the Mensch thing. But
and since most of our tax dollars are going to the wall and the Pentagon anyway, just give it to the nonprofits instead.
well, I'm not going to go there, but I am going to argue for the breakfasts at the Arlington Club, which used to be something that the business community did, and would stand up and raise their hand to participate in some kind of a project, and business owners would step forward with a $50,000 check and a $5,000 and a $10,000, and you'd have the Portland Development Commission loan money to individuals, and I do think that right now, the one-on-one seems to be working, or three-on-one in some cases. I mean, we do help people with their finances. We connected up with Heritage Bank when we started, and they have made exceptions for all of our trainees for the kinds of ID that they had to get in order to open a bank account, which we've asked them all to do. We also ask all of our trainees to purchase at least one tool every month. And we have a couple of folks that have been with us almost 2 years at this point, and they have a lot of tools, and a couple of them have trucks, and they're the ones that go out to the village to fix the equipment that we have out there when something goes wrong. I call the guy that lives at Hazelnut Grove to make a service call to Old Town, okay, to repair their facility. What we need to do really is we need to get more of these kinds of resources on the street. And I put the picture up behind me on purpose because that picture is in Old Town. It is, I believe, on 2nd and Cooch. And we'd love to have a movie done about that, Nili, and we'd love to have some food come down there, Craig. I know I can rely on you guys to do that, and I'm hoping that other folks that are on this call will respond in some way. Reach out to one of us, reach out, to Steve, come down to the job site, take a look at what we're doing, look at our websites, plug in wherever you can.
Andy, all the information of the organizations definitely will be available to everybody. There's been several questions about publicly and privately, what I would call scaffolding of that each organization sort of talking about what they're doing, and then do they have other scaffolding services available, sort of like the financial literacy that Craig was just talking about in the chat, the job skills, the connecting, and all of your organizations do this. And so it seems like one of the missing pieces that I'm seeing from the questions in those here is that if you're not directly involved in one of your organizations, right, or if you're not on the ground doing this, that you don't understand sort of what's happening in that landscape. So I'm wondering about giving a good example of when, a public-private partnership, or how to then, how can we make this more known? How can we, again, work across all these different lines of public, private, and government to really address some of these systemic problems we go? And Nili, I know you were raising your hand. Do you want to?
I think changing hearts is the first step. That's why I make films and not food. I'm not a great cook either, but because it can broadcast widely and change people's feelings. So organizing screenings for the communities that you guys are a part of. 1 hour with a couple of these young filmmakers and their body of work, the light bulbs go off. People cannot help but see the complexity and the humanity in these issues and feel compelled to do something about it, whatever they can, whether it's just looking somebody in the eye when they see them on the street and not averting their gaze, to talking to the elected officials, to anything in between. But first you have to want to do it. And that's where film, and meeting real human beings. There's nothing better than that. And then film is the next best thing. And the combination of the two, I think, is a home run.
I often talk about how one of the most beautiful parts of our tradition is that we are holy because God is holy and God created us in this holiness. And that if we actually truly looked at each individual as containing holiness, how that would reorient the way in which we see the world, which I just reminded me, Nili, as you were saying, just sort of that understanding and connection, that humanizing of what we're saying. We're talking about people. We're talking about our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors, all of that. And at the same time, we were on our little breakout. We actually started this conversation, and I don't know, and again, seeing other questions about this sense that, Portland has gone from the city of roses to the city of garbage. That how, one of the questions was about how would you protect the city and its residents while being compassionate towards the houseless? And so also thinking about that is that's a very loaded question. But again, I think it speaks to that partnership of how do we, that those that are not in the trenches every day, what can we do to better understand and to make a difference? Craig, do you want to, or then I'll stick Andy on it.
Yeah, I think the humanizing aspect that Nili was talking about is critical to that. And that just to say that this is not an us versus them question, that was sort of part of our email discussion as well, that, we are in this as a city, and that we need to be looking at solutions to this crisis alongside people with lived experience, not just, hey, how can we solve this problem for somebody else, but that we're working hand in hand with people and figuring out what they want and need is really critical. But I know that Andy also has a bit to say, so I will cede my time to him.
Well, as usual, Craig, I'm honored. Thank you. And if you need a good caterer, give him a call. I do really think that we have a very unusual opportunity in Old Town right now in a parking lot that is currently owned by Northwest Natural Gas and I believe is being sold to Prosper Portland very recently or coming up soon or whatever. And it has something to do with the food carts that are also in the mix here in our community. So it's a restaurant thing. It's an enormous lot. There's power, there's water, there's an opportunity for, and from the Cascadia cluster's perspective, we would be willing to move part of our operation into Old Town, to not just to be closer to Craig, but to make a statement that we're really enjoying being out in Southwest Portland. This is not where the folks really need us. We could build the hygiene units on site. We could build the platforms for the tents to go on top of. We could employ the folks that are living in the area. We could connect them with the African-American population that is really, I think, been not necessarily getting communicated with as effectively as could be possible. Let's just leave it that way. And I do believe that we have an obligation to the 400 plus people camping around the Old Town Village, maybe even more so than the 40 people or so inside the little village. We've proposed several things to the city. They are open, they are trying to move forward, but I would just offer up that for a lot less money, a lot less hassle, we'd be delighted to work with elements within the business community, building owners, whatever, neighborhood business associations, area by area to build out some of these hygiene stations. We could even have people sleeping overnight. And remember, everything that we do is mobile. We'd love to have Craig set up shop in the middle of that parking lot. We just happen to have a trailer that's partially fitted out as a kitchen. We'll bring it down there. We'll do a fundraiser. We'll make a kitchen out of it. Train people on site. We can do this, but we need your help. I mean, I know that I'm maxed out. Happy to keep doing more. I know that Craig looks tired there, buddy. Anyway, thank you, folks.
Going back to the chat, there were some more questions. One was, what are the top 3 things people who are homeless say they need for their life to progress to greater stability? So what are the top 3 things people who are homeless say they need for their life to progress to greater stability?
I mean, I think that's showers, laundry, honestly, and a safe place to sleep.
Basic.
In that order. In that order.
Nili?
One of our youth just walked in. You want me to ask him?
Sure. But nothing like putting them on the spot.
I love it.
Yeah, I would put stable housing at the top of that list, because I think, you know, you can't solve the mental health challenges when you aren't sure where you're going to sleep. And then next on that would be a stable income or a way to pay for that housing.
Hey folks, meet Narcy. Narcy Smith is one of our filmmakers. He's been coming in every day we're open to work on stuff. Narcy, what are the top 3 things people living on the streets need to move their life forward?
They need ability to have access to a phone, like service. They need ability to get a job, and the way to get a job is a phone, like communication, and they need clothing, and they need a way to go to the bathroom and shower.
Thanks, Narcy.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Just the basics.
Just the basics. We're looking at our hierarchy of needs. We start
Jumping in on the hierarchy of needs, though, somebody mentioned Maimonides, and the greatest form of giving is to make somebody self-sufficient so that they don't need you anymore, and that is giving somebody a job. And there's the community that is allowed outside the frame to be the most self-sufficient is the Jewish community, because they put their money where their values and their mouth is. I would not be able to fulfill my potential if it wasn't for a Jewish family that helped us start up, Jewish family from the Bay Area. And now we're Portland's problem, which means we're your problem. And anyway, this community helps the city more than any other that I've seen. So thank you.
And I have to give a shout out to the CBI Brotherhood for helping us get started 3.5 years ago down in the Northwest Pearl District at Castaways. They were great. Thank you.
And many people in this Zoom room. Thank you.
Yes. I mean, I think that's, I commend the MJCC for pulling this type of conversation. And my understanding is it's the second conversation already that you've had on houselessness to this group. So that's not just sort of the typical everyday is mitzvah day, although I know that there's no distinction that all of you underpin your Jewish values with how you move in the world, but that it is this partnership that we're all in this to make this world a better place. And we know that that is possible. Going back to what Nili said in the beginning on some of the values, that we know that we're not going to complete the task. Say that as Jews, we live in an unredeemed world. So there is a lot in front of us, and every day that we're working towards that redemption, and that it can feel very overwhelming. And something like this feels very overwhelming when we're walking around, but that we cannot just close our eyes and turn away from it. And I appreciate that the MJCC takes that seriously and says we're going to put that in front of, you know, the broad Jewish community of this area, to say we can't just close our eyes to this. We really have to think creatively about it. We have to bring in experts. We have to bring in people who are literally, you know, on the street doing this work, and that we have to then expose it to lots of other folks to say, here's how you can get involved. So again, I would say that Saul put all the organizations in the chat. I'm not sure if there are things that are sent out afterwards beyond a recording, but to get in touch with all of these leaders and to figure out how you can partner, how you can volunteer. Adina is also on this call from TVNU. I'm sure there's other people doing great work. TVNU, which is the Social Justice Gap Year Program, which is amazing work, and it works with these organizations, putting students, putting these kids into these organizations to do good work, to then go back to their cities and bring more justice. So I know there's close partnerships there. I know we could go through all these frames and think about the different partnerships. So it's really, it is powerful, and we do really powerful work. We're stronger together. We know that. Just really appreciate everyone being here. Saul, we're at 12:59.
Sorry, still muted. First, I want to thank our panelists and our moderator, Rabbi Joseph and Andy and Nili and Craig. I feel like we've been talking about having this event since back in November, so it is great to have everyone together now, and I thank you for the work that you're doing in the city, because you're making a huge difference for folks who really need it, and it benefits everybody. We had Nili did a film for the JCC, did our video a year ago, and I've had a couple meals over at Stone Soup, and they're delicious. And Andy's doing great work over on our campus and in the community. So thank you to everyone. And
we're no saints. We do it because it's fun.
And Rabbi Joseph is a light, so we know. So we're really blessed to have all of you in here in Portland. I want to thank our sponsors again. I want to thank Portland State University. I want to thank Richard Barker. I want to thank Barry and Karla Benson, Jonathan Singer of Barg PC, Barg Singer PC, Stewart Gordon Straus Architect, First Republic Bank, and the Jerry and Helen Stern Grandchildren's Fund of OJCF. I am going to put a link in the chat for we're doing a survey of what we want to do for the rest of the year. This will be our last random business Zoom. Starting on August 20th, we will be doing our business Zooms the third Thursday of every month at noon. So we were off by a week this month, but the third Thursday of every month at noon, we will be having a business Zoom. And our next one is titled, let me get it in front of me. Build your food and eat it too. No, build your biz and eat it too. It's Thursday, August 20th from noon to about 1. Our panelists will be Jessica Hilbert from Red Duck Foods, Valerie Roth from Mind Germana, and Jen Toplith from Runes. And our moderator will be David Foreman. And this is a panel on food entrepreneurs. And with that, we will let folks go. I imagine the panelists will be around if there are further questions people want to ask. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next month. Take the survey.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions anybody might have. Please come on out and visit.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all for organizing this. Really appreciate the opportunity.
My
Yes.
pleasure. My
And
pleasure.
we love Tivnu.
I love the Jewish community. You can like let your hair down and just.
Nili, I wish I had gotten I got quite a few screenshots, but I missed getting a screenshot of when you went and asked the question.